Welcome to my 6th round recap of my chess tournament that I played in Sardinia, Italy. Today is a really fun recap. I played somebody from Italy, a local who was 1940 and having as bad a tournament as I. I have the black pieces and I played an opening that we will revisit now for the first time in 7 months that I played only once in this journey back in October. And that is against e4 in the Scotch game. Yes, white played d4. I knew this before the game, so I played the same prep as I did that one time in Germany back in October, and I took here knight takes and I played knight f6. Online, and my opponent prepared against what I play online, I played bishop c5, and after knight f6, he shook his head and was kind of disturbed by this. Knight f6, he plays this interesting system that's not often seen. It's kind of a sideline that's kind of ambitious, and he goes takes, completely normal. e5, queen e7, queen here, knight d5, completely normal. And in October, my opponent went with c4, and we went into this really insane line. I went like knight b4. I ended up attacking this queen, and nobody developed their pieces. The last move of the game was a castling move, which was crazy. My opponent goes h4 here. Completely different than c4. My knight is still in the center, and he has even rook h3 ideas for rook lifts, and I prepared this all morning before the game. I prepared f6. You can play d6. You can also play bishop e7 and castles. There's so many things that you can play, even at the top level. It was kind of a lot to prepare against, but I went with f6. I don't really remember my prep, but I went f6 with like all these lines. I had like 20 moves memorized and one certain line that I thought he would play, and he went with e takes f6, queen takes. It's forced, like we're gonna trade queens. They're pinned to each other. So takes, and now I take, and it's an endgame. Like just 10 moves in, and it's already an endgame. And let's play it through, you know? So knight takes f6. What are black's advantages in this position? What are black's disadvantages? And what are white's advantages? What are white's disadvantages? That's what you have to do at the beginning of an endgame to sort out your plan. In the endgame, your plan is more important than your next 5 moves, or your next move for that matter. So on his turn, you know, we both have an hour and a half, all our time and then some. I was thinking, what is gonna be my plan here? And pause the video to solve, to assert my advantages, my disadvantages, my opponent's advantages, his disadvantages. I asserted that white has a small edge, because white has a 3-on-2 on the king side, which is greater than my 4-on-3 on the queen side. I also have 2 pawn islands here, which is a big disadvantage. Here, this is also could be called an isolated pawn, which is also weak. Let's say he manages to double 2 rooks on this pawn. It's very hard to defend it. Bishop pair wise, we both have the bishop pair, so on the minor piece side, nothing's really big, nothing's really crazy. And also on the spatial side, I would say it's also pretty equal. He controls pretty much his zone of the board, and I control my zone. The only thing that is a little advantage for me is that I have something called a central pawn left. He traded off both of his central pawns very early off in the game, and I have 1 central pawn left, which means that this pawn can be a fighter for me and take up some squares in the center that will bring very much value to my pieces and help me grow my space advantage. So that's it for analysis from now. Let's see how I put these theories to plans in practice and play it out. So he castles immediately. Very good. He's going to play like a rook on this e-file, and my king is going to be, in the crosshairs of everything. I go bishop c5. A very natural move. The bishop develops, pins this pawn. You really want to stop the white pieces from pushing fast, right? And also it has a little light on this king. Maybe some things to do there with a weakness in the future. My opponent goes with knight c3, so I go castles. My rook is immediately into play. I really like this move, because now we're already seeing my rook and my bishop combining together on a weakness of the white pieces. And now that white has castled, I'm also observing that this pawn is much weaker since it doesn't have the defense of this rook. So this is a target, this is a target. This might be a target if I can get a bishop on f5 and attack it, because it's just hard to defend as a pawn. Also, this is on a semi-open file, so I can restrict the development of this bishop with a rook b8, something that I thought of during the course of the game. Bishop g5 is played. I don't know why this is played. I can kick the bishop if I want, though not now. On h6, bishop takes, probably rook takes to keep the structure intact, but then knight e4, and I don't love this. It looks like I'm going to be losing maybe a piece, or maybe I'm just going to have to play my pieces weirdly. Like, I'm already thinking something like this, and then my rook is placed super awkwardly on the board. I don't want any of this. So okay, I can't kick the bishop now, but in the future, when I do kick the bishop, it just has to go back to f4, which I think it's supposed to be on f4 if you can keep a bishop on f4. Instead, bishop g5 allows me to do a very nice move that we've talked about, and that is d5. And now I'm actually preparing h6 to kick the bishop, because now if takes, rook takes, knight e4 is not possible, controlling the central squares. This last pawn on d4, this move, this opens up my bishop to maybe go to f5 and attack a weakness on c2. So everything is coming into play. You're just seeing how my position is sprouting and coming together, building that chemistry that you love. Rook ad1 was played. I don't know why this was played. For me, this is a strategical error because the rook placed on the c file, it's not an open file. You want a rook that's placed on the open file. You want to be first on that open e file and get it, like, it's first come first serve. So you want to get there first, and he had the move. So I think you can't detach this rook from f2, but potentially this rook coming to the e file to better develop. Anyways, that's what I thought. Here, I thought for a long time, because this weakness is not getting out of my head. Yes, I could develop this bishop and be a normal person, or I could be rook b8 and attack this b2 pawn. But something about f2 made me think about this knight g4 or knight e4. If I go knight e4, we trade off these knights, and this pawn is isolated, and I just don't like this long term. So I looked only at knight g4. That really looks good. I mean, if I can get 3 pieces on one pawn, and your defenders are a king, which is the weakest piece in chess, and a rook, this looks good. And if you take, I calculated that this doesn't really look good for white. You have to move your rook for a second time in 3 moves. And what squares? Rook d2 doesn't look good. Rook e1, this rook looks pretty squared in. I don't know, I think I really like this for the black pieces. And the engine too, giving black a small edge. So knight g4 kind of forced this bishop f3 move that doesn't make any weaknesses. It doesn't enhance my position, but the white pieces are covering up for their lack thereof of good security on f2, which means that now I can make a small perpetual, knight e5, bishop back, knight g4, bishop f3. This sort of teasing is very, very normal in classical chess. Just because you gain some time on the clock, you have some moves in your bin just in case you get closer and closer to that 30-move bonus time, which I did have in this tournament. And as well, it's that psychological edge. So when you repeat twice, not 3 times, because 3 times the opponent can claim a draw, if you repeat twice, the opponent is thinking as though they could get a draw out of this, and now psychologically they are playing for one. And of course I'm playing for a win, but you are playing for a draw, so you're more on the defensive. That's what it says. So a tip if you ever have this. So finally I decide on knight e5, bishop back. Here I go with bishop f5. Bishop f5 attacks the final weakness. So we have 1 weakness, we have 2 weaknesses. This is a weakness, but I can't really get to it at this moment. But I really like the progress that we have. Contrarily, or contrastly shall I say, where are you attacking my weaknesses? I have absurdly weak pawns. Hard to get to, I get that, but there are still weaknesses, and white is not doing any actions to get on these pawns. Bishop d3, and now white has the advantage, and they even have a win. I didn't find the win in the game. It is hard to find. You have to kind of calculate and give the initiative. Pause the video to solve, black to play and obtain a certain advantage. It's a very obvious move when I tell you there's a tactic, but trust me, it's hard to really narrow down that this is objectively winning and pretty forced for black. The tactic is knight g4, putting some pressure on f2. I'm threatening bishop takes d3 and winning the pawn on f2 because my rook is opened up on this pawn. And 3 attackers, 2 defenders, that makes for a good time. Here, given this threat, if you just deny it, I'll have h6 kicking the bishop. Bishop has to go all the way back, and now we have takes on f2 anyways. Rook takes, bishop takes f2, and after king takes, we have this nice discovered attack, bishop takes c2 check, winning back the exchange. And after the king moves, bishop takes, we're up 2 exchanges for 3 minor pieces. Wait, no, 2 rooks for 3 minor pieces. It's a decisively winning position, especially with this rook coming on to b8. This is like really, really good. The reason why I didn't decide to play on this is because it gives the initiative. So when white takes on f5 and I take back, yes, I'm threatening this pawn threefold. White has a move, you know? And I didn't really register that on taking back, I have the initiative again, actually, because I'm making a threat and my opponent isn't. Even if it's my opponent's move, I'm making all the threats. I'm the king of the mountain. So here, white would have to resort to literally giving a pawn, and it would be advantage to the black pieces. If you found knight g4, it's a very good tactic. Congratulations, I didn't find it during the game. I found a tactic 4 moves into the future, which would guarantee my opponents having a bad position or falling into this tactic. So from here, I spotted the tactic. Okay. Here I have knight takes d3. My opponent has to take with the pawn, creating an isolated pawn. This is good, as we have seen today. This is creating a weakness on the board. This isolated pawn, although it's not on an open file for me to attack, it is hard to defend and weak because it doesn't have pawns on adjacent files to defend it. I go with h6, kicking this bishop. And here I thought, well, okay, you have 3 options. Bishop c1, bishop d2, and bishop e3. This is before I take the bishop, which is very committal 2 moves ago. You're gonna have to see these things before taking that bishop. It's too committal otherwise. I thought if bishop d2 is really reductive, you're disqualifying your rook from any action. This rook is gonna have to move again to spur into action again. And the bishop on c1 is just absolutely trash and passive, right? But this looks like a really good move. My opponent takes some time here and plays bishop e3. And here, I already knew it because I told you, I saw a tactic that was 3 moves ago. I saw a tactic here. It is black to play and win. And no, it is not as easy as you see. White has a very good defense, and you still have to look beyond that. And seeing that 2-3 moves ago, one can understand that it's pretty hard to see this. Black to play and win. Pause the video to solve the problem. I played the very nice move d4. A pawn move that forks these 2 pieces. Now, my opponent is a strong player. 1940 FIDE rating. Very strong. And he saw this, but white has a nice tactic. It's knight a4. And he's saying that, okay, you can take my bishop. And when I take your bishop, when you take my pawn, I can take back with my rook. And what are you left with? Double isolated pawns here, another isolated pawn, and I have a near perfect pawn structure with only 1 isolated pawn on d3. You had to see though that d takes e3 just makes white resign on the spot. Here, after you take my bishop, I have the small pawn move, not e takes f2, but in fact e2, forking these 2 rooks. The rook that was binded, tied up to this f2 pawn for most of the entire game due to my pieces' pressure, and this rook badly cast on the d1 square to perform a theatrical disaster on his own pieces. I hope you enjoyed this recap of my round 6 in Sardinia, and now I have 2 points out of 6. 33% for this section is still a disappointment, but it's better than at the very start of the tournament. Thank you so much for watching, and in round 7, I am playing an 11-year-old who's a FIDE master already and boasts a rating of 2140 FIDE. See you in round 7.